In true ADHD fashion, I totally forgot to film the intro to this video before I started reading the books, so I'm gonna do that now, because better late than never. It's my life motto. Hey friends, my name's Elizabeth, in case you're new here, in which case, welcome. Lovely to see you. I hope you're having a great day. And I, at the completely adult age of 30 years old, have been diagnosed with ADHD. It explains so much. I also got a haircut. I have bangs now. That's a fun thing. So this video is not going to be a long drawn out story time of the process of me starting to question the possibility of ADHD somewhere in my brain, or the process of diagnosis, or any of that. Maybe I'll make something like that at some point, but today is not that day. Today is the day that I want to read a bunch of books about ADHD to cram my already chaotic brain as full as possible with ADHD facts and coping mechanisms, tips, tricks, anecdotes, little snippets that make me sob my eyes out because I finally feel understood after 3 decades of not knowing that I had a spicy brain. There's a lot going on. Let's rewind for a second. When I got diagnosed, my clinician recommended a specific book for me to read. She said that other patients of hers had had really good experiences reading the book, that they'd felt very validated and seen, and that it had some helpful ideas for coping mechanisms and things to take on board at the beginning of my journey of treating this neurological disorder that I didn't know I had for the last 3 decades of my life. And as I was checking out with this one specific book, I noticed that there were a bunch of other books on ADHD that were listed underneath as like suggested related similar books. And my impulsive ADHD brain thought, why buy one book when you can buy 4? So I did. And when they arrived in the mail after the initial excitement of, ooh, let's open the package and find out what goodies are inside because I've already forgotten what I ordered, I took a second to look at the pile and I thought, why am I like this? ADHD. ADHD is the answer. So instead of shoving these books at the back of my bookcase and pretending I never bought them and pulling them out 3 years from now and remembering that I meant to read them and then probably not reading them again for another 3 years, I decided I would turn this into a reading challenge, into a video, so that I had the motivation, the urgency to read these books in a timely manner so I can actually take on this knowledge and apply it to my life moving forward. Now that I have a diagnosis and my understanding of myself and my brain is shifting pretty extremely and rapidly. So that's what this video is. I'm gonna read these 4 books about ADHD. I'm going to share my thoughts with you on them. My hope for this video is that it will be helpful to anyone out there who is potentially also newly diagnosed with ADHD. Maybe you've been diagnosed for a long time, but you're sort of rusty on reading up on it. Maybe you never have read up on it. Maybe you have a friend or a partner or a family member who has been diagnosed with ADHD and you're trying to learn more. And my hope is that in reading these, I can give you the answer of which one is likely to be your best fit, and you can just buy one book like I was supposed to do and have the best option for you instead of having to buy all 4 or all 20 or all however many books on ADHD are out there. I'm sure there are a lot. I am so grateful to Brooklinen for sponsoring this video that was literally months in the making. Later on in this video, I'm gonna share my experience sleeping in my Brooklinen sheets for a couple of months and also unboxing a brand new set of sheets, making my bed with them, giving you my first impressions, all with the incredibly helpful assistance of my 2 cats, which make everything just a little bit more chaotic, as if I needed even more chaos. Good thing they're so lovable. Brooklinen has their birthday sale on right now. Use the link in my description box to shop their 25% off birthday sale. It's a great time to grab even more of your favorites or maybe try Brooklinen for the very first time. And now let me introduce the books I'm going to be reading in this video. So the first book that I'm reading for this video, and technically have already finished reading because, as I said, I started reading the books before I remembered to film the intro to this video, is Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate, MD, who is a Canadian physician. And this is the book that was recommended to me by my clinician. This is the one that she had had other patients really resonate with. This book is structured as sort of an all-encompassing guide to the physiological and neurological traits of ADHD, how it develops, how it manifests itself in children and adults, and just in general seems like kind of a great primer to get you started. Predominantly aimed at the parents of children with ADHD, but also with a section tailored to adult ADHD and just generally meant to kind of work for anyone who is trying to figure out their brain or support someone in their life who has ADHD. The second book I picked up was Driven to Distraction by Edward M. Hallowell, MD, and John J. Ratty, MD. And the subtitle on this one is Recognizing and Coping with Attention Deficit Disorder from Childhood Through Adulthood. So I'm halfway through this one. This was the second one that I picked up. This book is split into 9 chapters, and each chapter is about a different area. So the first one is talking about what ADHD actually is. The second chapter is about ADHD in children. The third is ADHD in adults. But the style is less direct than Scattered Minds. It's a compilation of stories, anecdotes about different patients with ADHD and their experiences, and those are all kind of grouped together in the different chapters under the different topics with paragraphs in between sort of reinforcing ideas from the story or tying things together or adding something further from the authors. This book is aiming to dispel myths and also give lots of ideas for coping strategies and things to do in your life to make it easier to live with ADHD. So that's kind of where this one slots in. The third book I picked up was A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD, Embrace Neurodiversity, Live Boldly, and Break Through Barriers by Sari Solden, MS, and Michelle Frank, PsyD. And there are bullet points on the front to give more context. It says, untangle your brain-based challenges, overcome negative self-talk, discover your strengths, build meaningful relationships, resist cultural stigma. So this one is specifically aimed at women with ADHD, adult women with ADHD, which I was really looking forward to at least having one book that was specifically focused on that demographic, which I fit into, because I think women who are diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood have a different set of struggles than men who are diagnosed in adulthood, or even women and men who are diagnosed as children. And to my understanding, it's pretty generally accepted that ADHD in women and girls can present itself quite differently from how it does in boys and men, and that can lead to it being very underdiagnosed and misunderstood. And I liked that this was a different take on it. Unlike the other books, this one is in a workbook format. So it has areas for reflection and quizzes where you can check off what applies to you, and little side stories and journaling and chapter takeaways and tips and tricks. So it's much more involved. It's more of a conversation, which I liked the idea of. I'm about a chapter and a half into this. I just started it so I could get a little bit of a taste, but I didn't want to read too far, so just did the first little bit so I could get a feel for it. So that's book number 3. And the last book I'm reading for this video is Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, Proven Strategies to Succeed at Work, at Home, and in Relationships by Russell A. Barkley, PhD. And my understanding is that Russell Barkley is pretty well known within the ADHD community as an expert. So I definitely wanted to read something written by him and get his perspective on everything. This one is sort of a blend of some of the other books in terms of its structure. It is set up in chapters of sort of a step-by-step process of what to do, starting with getting evaluated and potentially being diagnosed, and then what steps to take after that to take charge of your ADHD. I'd say out of all of them, it's structured most like Scattered Minds, of having different chapters about different topics and sort of being more educational in tone, I guess. But it does have some little tidbits that remind me of A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD, because it does have some inclusion of journaling throughout. And I haven't started this one yet, so I don't know for sure, but reading the table of contents, I get the idea that this one might focus even more so on tips and tricks and coping strategies and things to try than the other books do, just by the way that it seems to be split up, but I'll have to read it to find out for sure. So those are the 4 books I'm reading for this video, and my hope is that all of them will have at least a couple nuggets of wisdom that I can pluck out of there and apply to my life. Fingers crossed. But now that I've done the introduction that I probably should have filmed over a month ago, I'm going to talk to you about the first book of the 4. That was more awkward than I wanted it to be. Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. So like I said, this is the one that was recommended to me by my clinician, so it was the one that started this whole thing, and it's the one I wanted to start reading first. Little did I know, and I didn't learn this until I was about halfway through the book, and I decided to Google a bit about the author. Apparently, Gabor Mate is a little bit of a controversial figure within the ADHD world. Some people absolutely love him and love his work and love the way he talks about ADHD, and some people really do not. So I'm not gonna be able to tell you one way or the other because I'm not an expert in ADHD. I'm just a person who recently discovered I have it. But I decided to finish it anyway, even though he's apparently a controversial figure, because at that halfway point, I had already come across quite a few things that I felt could benefit me in one way or another, as you might be able to notice by how many tabs I have in this. So my understanding of why this is controversial, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, let me know if I'm missing anything, but my understanding is that there are those in the ADHD community who don't like this book or like the way that Gabor Mate talks about ADHD because of his theory around how ADHD comes to be. So TLDR for this theory, that human beings evolved to walk on two legs, which necessitated the narrowing of our hips, and narrowing the hips also narrowed the birth canal, which meant that babies could only be born with so big of a head before childbirth was no longer going to be happening. So to compensate for this, evolution took the course of human beings being born earlier in their development compared to other mammals, and for a lot of the brain development to happen after birth so as not to cause issues with the whole giving birth thing. So what Gabor Mate is talking about here is that a baby is born predisposed to have ADHD because of their genes. That is baked into who they are, to their brain at birth, but then the ways that their brain develops or doesn't develop in certain areas after birth is sort of that special sauce, the thing that really determines whether ADHD exists or not. So the idea here is that if the conditions aren't ideal for the development of the brain after birth, if the prefrontal cortex specifically is not able to develop in the ideal way, then these symptoms, these traits that anybody could have will be much more severe, and you have ADHD. So that's his theory, and that sort of hinges on this idea that the development of our prefrontal cortex is heavily influenced by our attachment as a child, having attunement with a parental figure in especially the first year of life. So that is what he's talking about. That's what he focuses on. He fully supports the idea of ADHD as a hereditary genetic condition, but he chooses to focus the book mostly on the developmental side because that's something, if he's correct, that we could actually work on as a society. We could help parents with that fourth trimester, as it's sometimes called, to help them make sure that their baby is getting the best chance at full prefrontal cortex development as possible. Whereas the genetic component is not necessarily we can do something about outside of getting into some dodgy conversations about eugenics, which we don't want to get into. So that is the controversial thing about this book, is that theory. To my understanding, there are a lot of people who think that that is completely false and that there's no evidence for that, and that Gabor Mate doesn't know what he's talking about in terms of that link between prefrontal cortex development and attunement and attachment with parental figures and how that all ties together, so that his opinions on ADHD in general are null and void. That was a lot. So, like I said, I can't tell you one way or the other if what he's saying is true. I am not an expert. I have not done any research into ADHD. I have not looked at the studies. One of the biggest drawbacks for me about this book was the lack of sources, the lack of references to scientific studies that I could then go and look at myself and learn more from. He addresses the reason why he chose not to do that, but I wish he had anyway, because it definitely lends weight to what you're saying in a book about a medical condition if you are citing your sources. And he does cite some, but not as many as I would have liked. So there's definitely quite a few things that I tabbed that I would like to look into further, that I would like to try to find some of the studies that he's maybe getting this information from so that I can form my own opinion, but I haven't had time to do that yet. So right now I'm just basing my opinion on this book from what I read and how I felt about it. And what I will say is that I don't know if what he's saying is true or makes sense. I think that we don't know all that much about how the brain works still. As advanced as we are in a lot of areas, the brain is still a mystery in many ways. ways. So he could be right. He could be spot on. He could be also completely wrong. Everyone else could be completely wrong about what ADHD is. ADHD could not even be one singular thing. It could be a bunch of different conditions that have all been lumped under one name, and maybe they shouldn't be. We actually don't know. I have no idea. We can only go off what we know right now, which is not as much as we would like. For all of the sections of the book that were focused on how ADHD develops in a more technical sense, I found it interesting to read, but I'm not putting a huge amount of stock into it. That's not the main thing I'm focusing on in terms of this book. And to be honest, whether it's true or not doesn't affect me that much, because regardless of how ADHD comes to exist, I have it. So my main focus is not how I ended up with the brain I have. My main focus is to understand it better, to learn how to live with it better, to learn to have more self-compassion and understanding of myself. Those are the things that I'm looking for, less so the hard and fast technical process of how this comes to be. It's interesting. It was interesting to read, but again, I'm not putting a huge amount of stock in it, or it's not the main reason I'm reading these books, and it's also not the thing that I'm going to take away. Another thing I wanted to mention about this book is that it was first published in 1999, and while it has been updated, there are some outdated ideas included, and there's also the use of some words that we no longer use to refer to people who are struggling with their mental health or suffering from mental illness. So I was surprised that those things had not been edited. So just keep that in mind going into it. On to the positives, what I felt I did take away from this and what I feel I learned. For me, the best thing about this was the validation. To be honest, the author himself has ADHD, all of his kids have ADHD, and he's worked with a lot of patients with ADHD in his practice. And so many of the little stories he told about patients or himself or his kids just hit so close to home, and I'm not too proud to admit that I cried at multiple times reading this. Just that catharsis and the realization that I am not alone in so many of the things that I've struggled with for my entire life, that this is a common experience for many, many people on the planet who have ADHD, and that was very reassuring and validating, and for sure the best part of this book for me. I was hoping that this book would be more helpful in terms of coping mechanisms or strategies to try to help to compensate for some of the issues that come along with ADHD, predominantly executive dysfunction, but this book didn't focus nearly as much on the coping strategies as I would have hoped. There's a smattering, but they're pretty vague. You know, they give you a jumping off point, they give you an idea to start with, but they don't really go into any of the nitty-gritty of recommendations, things to try. It's more of an overview of possible coping strategies rather than really getting into them, which was a bit of a letdown for me. I also found that I benefited a lot from reading the sections aimed at parents of children with ADHD, again, for that validating factor, but also getting a bit more of an understanding of how my parents might have been feeling throughout my childhood, not just how I was feeling. I can look back on my childhood and see a lot of examples of myself being a little kid with ADHD and not necessarily getting the support that I needed or being given the understanding that I needed for what I was struggling with. But it's also helpful to read experiences of parents with kids with ADHD, because it does help me see what my parents were dealing with trying to parent me, and, you know, me being very different from my older sibling and them not really knowing what to do about me. That was nice as well. I think it allowed me to have more understanding of their experiences and also realize some things about my childhood experiences that I hadn't quite figured out even in almost a decade of therapy. This did give me a lot of jumping off points to talk to my therapist about, which was really nice and helpful. So for that, it was definitely beneficial, I would say. So do I recommend this book? Yes and no. I hesitate a little bit to recommend it because there is so much contention around this author and around his theories. Yes, I would recommend it with a caveat, and the caveat is keep in mind that his theories are contested. Don't take his explanation of how ADHD develops as gospel. Read other books or articles or watch videos where people explain how it comes about from a different perspective, and, you know, take it all with a grain of salt. I definitely think this could be helpful to other adults who are recently diagnosed with ADHD ADHD. Like me, you might find this book incredibly validating and feel a sense of relief reading some of these experiences and stories, feel a little bit of a weight lifted off your chest and a little bit of the beginnings of the potential for some more self-compassion in some of those areas where we struggle. But I wouldn't recommend it if you are an adult with ADHD who has already sort of found those things, if you've already felt validated through watching YouTube videos or TikToks or on Reddit, or you've read another book, or you have a family member with ADHD, and what you're really focused on is the next steps, coping mechanisms, what you can do to make your life run a little more smoothly, make your brain behave a little bit better. This is less so the book for you. As for parents of children with ADHD, this book is specifically aimed at you. So being a person with ADHD who has had parents, well, I still have parents, they're still alive. But anyways, I can see this being helpful for parents with ADHD on the condition that those parents are open to learning that maybe the ways that they are currently parenting their child or children with ADHD might not be the most effective or the most helpful option. I have seen some reviews from parents who read this book and felt like the author was just blaming their children's ADHD on the parents, that the author was saying that the parents were doing everything wrong, they caused their kids ADHD, and they're also making it worse by how they're parenting them. And I would say that's not at all how it came across to me reading it, but the author definitely talks about the ways that parenting can affect a child with ADHD, the ways that certain choices a parent might make might not work for someone with ADHD the way it might work fine for a kid that doesn't have ADHD. But I think if you're more open to the idea that there are things that you can still learn about being a great parent, especially to a child with ADHD, and you're open to making those changes so you can support your kid the best way you can, I think that this book might be really helpful to you. Again, from the perspective of someone who's not a parent, I would love to know in the comments down below if you are a parent of a child with ADHD and you've read this book, if you thought it was helpful. Was it helpful to you? I would love to know. If you don't have ADHD yourself and you don't have kids with ADHD, but maybe you're in the other category of having a family member or a partner who has ADHD and you're wanting to support them, I think this book could potentially be helpful to you, but it's definitely not specifically aimed at your situation. I think that there's likely other books that are a little bit better suited to that demographic. So I'll finish reading the other books and then I'll let you know if I think one of those might be a little bit better for spouses or family members of adults with ADHD. So final thoughts on Scattered Minds. I'm giving it 3 stars out of 5. There are definitely a lot of things that I was able to take from it that I found beneficial. I found all the sections talking about Gabor Mate's theories on how ADHD develops very interesting to read, but I'm not sure how solid their scientific basis is, and that's something I'll have to look into further. I generally enjoyed the process of reading this book. I liked how it was written. The tone was quite light and injected with a bit of humor, but not making light of the struggles that come with ADHD. And I appreciated that the author shared so much of his own experiences with ADHD and his own experiences as a parent of children with ADHD. It was really great to see his vulnerability in sharing those things. And I could definitely relate both to him as an adult with ADHD, but also to his daughter in particular. Some of the stories he told about his daughter, my parents could have written about me, so I was definitely glad that he included those. Just a lot of helpful stuff in there for reframing my experiences through childhood and early adulthood and allowing me to maybe forgive myself a bit for the things I've struggled with and accept that there wasn't necessarily anything I could have done to have a different experience because my brain is the way my brain is, and be able to accept that and make peace with that and take the next step feeling a little bit more self-acceptance. Not a bad start, although it is a controversial start. Apparently. I also wanted to do a quick mid-book update for Driven to Distraction since I am halfway through. This one I'm finding less engaging so far. I'm having far fewer aha moments, but so far I am definitely tabbing less, I'm highlighting less, I'm writing fewer notes. It's not necessarily resonating with me quite as much. And I'm also not super loving the structure. The way that it's made up of so many stories about people with ADHD that are really extensive, just pages and pages and pages of one person's experiences, pages of dialogue back and forth between a doctor and a patient that seems to not be edited down at all for brevity. There's just this kind of plodding, repetitive feeling to it, and I'm not resonating with the specific stories nearly as much as I was with the stories included in Scattered Minds, especially because so far quite a few of them are centered around young boys with hyperactive type ADHD. And as a woman with combined type ADHD that definitely leans to the inattentive side, there's not a huge amount that I can resonate with young boys with sort of what we see as typical or traditional hyperactive ADHD. I'm definitely getting some benefit from it. There are some interesting passages, some quotes that I have resonated with, but so far there's not a lot that I feel I'll really take with me moving forward. Try not to pass judgment because I'm only halfway through. Maybe the second half of this book will be full of so many gems that I will take back everything I've said in this update. But right now I'm feeling a little meh about the whole thing. So I'm gonna go and read some more of Driven to Distraction, and I will pop back in here when I finish. Hey, I'm back with an update. I finished Driven to Distraction and I have some thoughts, so let's chat. I think I mentioned this when I was talking about my impression of this when I was about halfway through, but this is definitely not the most ADHD-friendly book I've ever read in my life. It is pretty repetitive and long-winded and bloated with anecdotes and stories. And as much as I'm not against the idea of including anecdotes and stories, I mean, Scattered Minds did that and I liked the inclusion, I think this book just allows them to go on for far too long. And there were so many moments while I was reading this that I was just begging the authors to hurry up and get to the point, because holy shit, it took forever. I contemplated giving up on reading this so many times, but I decided to stick to it because I was reading it for this video. That's basically the main reason. So yeah, thoughts. For me, the best part of this book was very much near the end. There was a section that went through 50 coping mechanisms or things to try for adults with ADHD that I really enjoyed, I really appreciated, and I'm definitely gonna be using that list as a jumping off point for myself. Although it was similar to Scattered Minds, very brief, just short little paragraphs about each idea, not too much in the way of ideas about how to incorporate things into your life, with very few exceptions. So I think my frustration with this is that 3/4 of the book, if not more, were kind of irrelevant to me or not really what I was looking for from this book. And then the last quarter was what I was looking for, and it was just so quickly sped through, while all the other chapters were so slow and unnecessarily detailed. It was just a bit frustrating. The very final chapter talked about more of the biological aspect of ADHD, what we know of what's actually happening in the brain. And that also was sort of more in line with what I was looking for from these books. So yeah, basically this book was not really well suited to what I personally was hoping to get out of the books that I chose for this challenge. I did like hearing all of the different theories, sort of how our understanding of ADHD has shifted over the years, but it did really reinforce to me that we could easily be wrong right now with what we think is happening, because we really don't know a lot about the brain and we really haven't figured out what is going on with ADHD. It's all theories right now. So I also found it interesting that they seem to completely shut down the idea that Gabor Mate is talking about in his book, which is the idea that it's not only genetic and biologically based, that it is that plus the nurture aspect that comes from the development once we're out of the womb. And their example for that was a study that looked at the incidence of ADHD in twins, and they found that identical twins were a lot more likely to both have ADHD than fraternal twins. I feel like that kind of misses the point, because I think everyone agrees that there is likely some form of a genetic component to do with ADHD. That doesn't seem to really be up for debate. How much of an impact can outside forces have on the expression of those genes? I just felt like, as much as they were very adamant to shut down the idea that nurture could have any impact on the development of ADHD, they didn't provide any evidence to support their opinion in the same way that Gabor Mate did not really provide any evidence to support his opinion that nature and nurture are sort of equally important in the development of ADHD. So I'm just still as confused as I was before, okay? This has not cleared up anything. So much for this being a way for me to learn a lot more about ADHD and have like concrete ideas about what it means and knowing what to do moving forward, because so far I just feel like I am more confused than ever. I could see this book potentially working for some people out there, people who are not me. There were some things about this that I appreciated. There were some things that I found interesting. There were definitely a couple moments that I felt, validated or seen, but not nearly to the same extent that I did with Scattered Minds. And for the most part, I found myself just trying to make it go faster to get through sort of the long dragging on parts to get to the parts that I was interested in. I would probably personally give this book around 2 stars. In terms of who I would recommend this to, or who I think this might work for better than me, I probably wouldn't recommend this to other adults who are being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. I also probably wouldn't really recommend this for parents with kids with ADHD. I don't think it has nearly as many helpful suggestions about how to handle it and things to try and how to support your child as Scattered Minds did. I actually think that the best target audience for this book would be either medical professionals who want to be more able to recognize ADHD in their patients, to be able to refer them to get a diagnosis. So much of this book, like the vast majority of this book, is talking about how to recognize that someone has ADHD, what the signs are, what it could look like, how it can present, how people with ADHD tend to talk about their experiences. And all of that I think could be really helpful for medical professionals who are not experts in ADHD, so like a family doctor. And the other group that I think would benefit from this is actually teachers. So after the section that I liked that was 50 coping mechanism ideas for adults with ADHD was a section with 50 ideas for teachers in classrooms to deal with having 1 or more students with ADHD, and some practical ideas for how to make the classroom environment more engaging, how to support them more, how to handle that dynamic. So I actually think that this would be really great for teachers to have more of an idea as well, just like with medical professionals, to have more knowledge to be able to identify that a child might be dealing with ADHD, to then communicate that with their parents and hopefully get them diagnosed if that is in fact the case. And then also some more practical tips for them to continue to be an effective educator when they have students with ADHD in their classroom. Yeah, those are my thoughts. I am going to move on to properly jump into the Radical Guide for Women with ADHD workbook, and also I'm going to start on Russell Barkley's book, Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. Those are the last 2 books for this challenge. Fingers crossed that at least one of those will hit a 4-star for me. That would be great. I would love a 5-star, but I'm starting to feel skeptical that that's going to happen. Maybe my expectations for what these books should be is too high, or maybe I just didn't find the specific niche of book on ADHD that is exactly what I was looking for, but the search continues. Hey friends, I am coming to you from my bedroom. I decided to change things up today, and I wanted to do a little bit of a mid-book update because I'm about halfway through A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD, and I'm struggling a bit. It's been very slow going. This one has definitely taken me the longest to read so far, even though it's the shortest. So I thought I'd come here, do a little mid-book update, keep you informed, and then I have a plan for today for how I'm going to motivate myself to actually finish this, because it's honestly getting ridiculous at this point. I just need to finish it. Okay, so thoughts so far. There are a couple points that I'm sort of struggling with this book. Like I mentioned earlier, the reason why I picked this one up specifically was that I was hoping that it would be the most relatable to me out of all of them, because it is specifically written for women with ADHD who aren't diagnosed until adulthood, which is me. In some ways, yes, it does feel like it sort of hits that very specific niche experience, but in some ways I almost feel like it's too niched down. I feel like, at least so far in the first half, that they're really focusing on, for the most part, a very particular type of woman, which they haven't outright said this, but my impression so far, it feels like they've written this specifically for American women, probably white and straight and cis, who grew up in maybe a more traditional or conservative or religious household and are struggling with not necessarily living up to those traditional gender roles or expectations of what their life should look like based on that upbringing. They do make an effort to be inclusive in little snippets here and there. They do mention that there are intersecting struggles that come together if you are a woman of color or if you are part of the LGBTQIA+ community, but they don't go into detail. Again, at least not so far in the first half. It's just sort of a throwaway line that they'll add in. But it really does feel, and there are a couple moments that really reinforce that. There's a section talking about how gender roles interact with ADHD, and I just couldn't relate to that. I wasn't raised in a particularly traditional or religious family. Anyways, that's just something that I'm noticing. It's a bit of a sticking point for me that is stopping me from really fully engaging with the text. I'm just finding myself being a little bit alienated by their narrow view of what the experience of being a woman diagnosed with ADHD as an adult is like. And then the other part that is sort of sticking for me is the journaling. Prompts themselves are not going as deep as I would hope. They're not as thorough or inspiring or thought-provoking as I was hoping going into it. I'm finding often that the prompts are asking questions that I already ask myself while reading. I'm also finding that sometimes prompts or journaling sections pop up in places they don't really need to be. Sometimes it feels like maybe they had a quota of how often they needed journaling prompts for it to be able to be classified as a workbook, or that their publisher told them to make sure that they had one every 5 pages or something. Sometimes they pop up in places that they just don't need to be, and they kind of break the flow of what they're talking about in that chapter. And sometimes they're just too many, or they're too repetitive, making it feel a little bit more like a chore, I guess, to read the book, because I feel like I'm cheating somehow if I skip any journaling questions, but sometimes I just literally don't have anything to write, you know? So I will say, again, I'm only halfway through, and the last chapter that I read before stopping was the best so far. It's a chapter talking about exploring your childhood dreams and figuring out whether any of those dreams are actually things that you can incorporate into your adult life. If there are aspects of them that you can tease apart and realize the deeper reason why you may have had that dream and figure out how to incorporate that deeper core value or want or need into your current life. So far, the little side stories haven't been getting to me as much as the stories in the first book I read, Scattered Minds. But the last little anecdote hit close to home, and I definitely started tearing up a little bit. So I'm trying to take that as a sign that things are going to get better. Maybe the first half was starting slow, trying to gradually get you into the process, and maybe the second half is going to go a lot deeper. That's what I'm hoping for anyway, so we'll see. I'm struggling with their aversion to using the word disability. They haven't used the word so far at all, as far as I've noticed, and their go-to seems to be to use difference when they mean disability. So they might say people who have invisible or visible differences instead of people who have invisible or visible disabilities. It does feel a little bit stigmatizing to avoid the use of the word disability at all costs, like it's a dirty word or bad word. Avoiding the term altogether in a book about ADHD feels odd to me. So I'm just putting a pin in that because I keep noticing it. It keeps giving me a bit of an ick feeling every time, and I'm not sure if they're going to address it at some point. I don't know. I hesitate to say it, but it is what comes to mind, a tiny bit of a toxic positivity vibe, and also a little bit of a young vibe. It almost feels like it was written for teenagers, not adults. I want to move on to the plan that I've concocted. It's brilliant to encourage me to finish this because, like I said, I've been struggling a bit to force myself to read it. I've been reading it so slowly and I just want to get it finished. I just want to do it. So my plan to do that, the first part of the plan was to read in our bedroom instead of many of the other places in the house that I could read, because I don't always spend time reading in the bedroom during the day, and it's really nice in here. I get to look outside at our backyard and see all the trees. It's a super sunny day. It's warm and beautiful out. I can hear and see the birds. And then the second part of my brilliant plan was to give myself a huge hit of dopamine to encourage me to finish reading. And the huge hit of dopamine that I'm giving myself is brand new sheets. I know, it's absolutely brilliant. So today's video is sponsored by Brooklinen, and they have gifted me a new set of sheets. I'm a little bit sad to take this set from them, their linen set, off the bed because we've been obsessed with it for the last couple months, but I'm really excited to try this new set. And I think new sheets that are different fabric and different colors are gonna give me all of the exciting new dopamine hit vibes. And I'm gonna climb in my brand new sheets once they're all fresh and clean and laundered, and hopefully that will be enough to motivate me to finish reading. I think it's a great plan. I'm gonna start by unboxing what Brooklinen sent me and share the new sheets with you before I pop them in the washing machine. Chewy always gets excited when boxes are involved, so I'm sure he will help, just like he did last time. If you are so inclined, feel free to leave guesses as to what color sheets I'm going for. I picked something different from our current sheets, something new for the spring-summer season. Very exciting. I wanted to take a quick second to introduce you to Brooklinen. If you missed my bedroom makeover video, which I'll link for you so you can go check it out if you did miss it, you can watch how this room came to be the way it is. Brooklinen is a luxury sheets company that is dedicated to bringing high quality sheets to your home at an affordable price. In fact, Brooklinen was founded on that concept, that everyone deserves high-quality luxury sheets at a fair and reasonable price. And I can speak from experience, having slept on these linen sheets from Brooklinen for the past few months. They are incredibly high quality. They are so comfortable. They have held up to washing incredibly well. They have also held up to cats who like to play on, under, and around them at all times very well. I chose Brooklinen for the sheets in our new home because I really wanted to invest in quality sheets for the first time in my life. I wanted to have sheets that would last, that would only get better with every wash, that would be comfortable and high quality. In other words, I was ready to invest in my husband and my sleep. We spend a third of our lives asleep, at least if we sleep the right amount. I don't know about you, but as a person with ADHD, I don't sleep nearly as much as I should. But that makes it even more important to have great sheets, because it's one thing to spend a third of your life asleep. Yes, you should have comfortable, high quality sheets. If you're going to spend a third of your life in them, you deserve that. I'm telling you, specifically you, that you deserve that, okay? But especially if you are a fellow ADHDer and you spend a lot of time awake in your bed when you should be asleep, it's even more important because you're actually conscious and aware of how comfortable or not comfortable your sheets are. So you extra deserve comfortable sheets. I truly and honestly believe that I sleep better in these Brooklinen sheets than I did in the lower quality sheets I was sleeping in before. But you don't have to just take my word for it, because Brooklinen has over 100,000 5-star reviews on their website. So just like last time, Brooklinen sent me a hardcore bundle, which is a full set of sheets, so a flat sheet, a fitted sheet, and 2 pillowcases, as well as a duvet cover and 2 extra pillowcases. So this time I decided to try something a little different. Instead of the linen, I decided to go with their luxe sheets. I'm very excited for my bed to feel like it belongs in a luxury hotel. And as you can see, I decided to go with a pattern this time. So here are the sheets I chose, and I'm so excited about this pattern. I love that they're white with this warm gray, and then the little spots that are almost like a marigold color. So pretty. So like I said, the sheet set comes with a flat sheet, a fitted sheet, and 2 pillowcases. So these feel really nice and smooth and soft, have really nice, clean stitching. Okay, so now unboxing the duvet cover. So this is the color I went for the second set of pillowcases and the duvet cover. It's this beautiful toffee shade. It's like a slightly desaturated golden yellow. But you have more options. You don't have to make your duvet cover and the second set of pillowcases match. You can pick a third color or pattern if you want to, or you could get everything the same color and pattern. You don't have to pick different ones if you don't want to. You can mix and match from over 20 plus different colors and patterns for your sheets. So you can really make your sheets represent you and your taste. I'm really excited to try the luxe sheets after loving the linen so much. The luxe sheets have a sateen finish, 480 thread count, and a slightly luminous finish. Sateen is more tightly woven and heavier than percale, which is what they use for their classic sheets, making them warmer and buttery soft, so they're perfect to use on your bed year-round. Brand new sheets, especially at the turning of the season, is such an amazing way to refresh your space and also to practice some self-care and make your space feel new and fresh and cozy again. So I'm gonna pop down and put these in the wash so I can get them all fresh and clean and put them on the bed. Before I go though, I do want to tell you about Brooklinen's birthday sale, which is on right now. You can get 25% off on their website until May 3rd, which makes it the perfect time to get yourselves some brand new sheets, practice some self-care, redecorate for the spring and summertime, put yourself first. So click the link in the description box and shop Brooklinen's birthday sale. Get 25% off until May 3rd. Oh, hi Yoda, you gonna help? So I'll do it like that for now. Thanks, honey. What do you think? What do you think of the new sheets? Huh? You like them? Do you like them? Yeah. They're nice. Yeah. Okay, I have to go get 2 pillows. I'll be back. Boop. Got my pillows. There is a beautiful pillow. Amazing. coming running. Yes, I am making the bed still. It's true. Can you come up here? Come up here. Good girl. Good girl. No, stay up here. Come here. Good girl. Yeah. Good girl. Okay, I'm just gonna pull this up a little. Okay. Sure, you can go under there, that's fine. All right, perfect. That's exactly what I meant. Hi, Chewy. You're gonna help too, eh? Into little bows, so they're easy to release, but also a bit more secure. Chewy, you don't need to attack your sister. I'm trying to make the bed. I know. Thank you. Okay. So we've got. I love that it's a toffee, caramel, sort of golden. And if I have the sheet, folded over as well. Pull the sheet out, over, and I kind of like the idea of tucking the sheet under to make it feel extra hotel-y. I'm very excited to climb between the sheets and do some cozy reading. Yeah, these feel super soft. I'm gonna do an update tomorrow and I'll let y'all know how it was sleeping in the sheets so I can give you a full review. Yeah, that's nice. I feel like I'm about to just fall asleep instead of doing the reading I'm supposed to do. Maybe this was a bad plan. Hey friends, so I know I said I was gonna come back in the morning to tell you how it was sleeping on these sheets overnight, but to be totally honest, I completely forgot. So I'm back now in the evening, the night after, to give you a little update, and I have to say, these were fantastic. I kid you not, I asked my husband how it was to sleep in these sheets. I gave him no prompts. He didn't hear me filming. He wasn't in the house earlier. He heard me say nothing about them, nada. And verbatim, the words out of his mouth were, "It's like sleeping on hotel sheets so nice that as you're checking out, you ask the front desk clerk where you can buy the same set for your own house." There you have it, folks. These are 100% the kind of sheets you would expect to sleep in a nice, a little bit out of your budget hotel. And honestly, we all deserve that level of luxury every single day at home. While I'm here with you, I want to give my final update on A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD because I finished this book very late last night, and I'm sad to report that it didn't really dig itself out of the holes that it had dug into in the first half. I honestly just think that this book is not for me. I think this book is for a very specific type of woman, a very nuanced, niched down, very, very, very specific woman, and that's not me. And also a woman who's looking for a very particular, very niched style of book. This is great if you are that person that I talked about in my mid-book update. If you are someone who grew up in a really conservative, religious, traditional household and you were taught all of those very traditional, conservative female roles and you're trying to figure out why you can't fit into those as an adult and coming to terms with your ADHD, you're trying to work through that latent shame, trying to figure out how you can build your own sense of womanhood without those very strict gender roles. If you're looking for motivation to be able to step into center stage in your life and take up space, find your voice, all of those things, then this will be the book for you. But if you are not looking for those things and you're not that specific woman, I don't think this is going to be the book you're looking for. It just ended up being a little too cheesy for me. The tone didn't work for me. Like I said earlier on, it has issues with not being particularly diverse or inclusive. I didn't feel particularly included in their vision of womanhood, and some of it just felt pretty out of touch. I think it's also, I should add, aimed at women who are upper middle class, because there's really very little acknowledgement of the financial issues that can come along with ADHD and how much harder it is to come to terms with loving everything about who you are and living fully in the ADHD realness of yourself when you need to keep a job and you need to keep up with expectations and pay your bills and survive. So yeah, this one was a miss for me. I would probably give it 2 stars because it did have a couple little nuggets of wisdom that I did appreciate. I did enjoy 2 of the chapters in particular, the one about dreams and redefining them for your future. And there was also another chapter about, what was the other chapter about? Oh, coming up with a personal mission statement, reinforcing your values. I appreciated those exercises as well. But there were as many chapters that were just awkward for me to read, very cheesy. There was a Declaration of Independence, ADHD Women edition, and it just felt so American and once again made me feel a little alienated by the book. It didn't have to be framed that way. I will say that it really didn't do anything to help with actually improving your life. It really is 100% about mindset and accepting yourself, which is great, but I think I've just done a few too many years of therapy for this to be valuable to me. And to the last page, there was no use of the word disability. They continue to use their differences, invisible and visible differences terminology, which, like I said earlier, I find to be stigmatizing. And honestly, the realest part of the book was the final letter that they write to the reader to kind of close things off. As I was reading that, I was just thinking to myself that I wish the whole book had been written that way, in a realer adult to adult kind of fashion, instead of feeling so patronizing, aimed at teenagers and full of all those toxic positivity, very white, hetero, religious, traditional American upper middle class vibes. Just as an example, one of the stories in this focuses on how a woman had to really work on herself and really go on an internal journey to realize that she couldn't handle the more active vacations that her husband liked to go on. She needed to do something a little more relaxing, like a cruise. And she had to convince her husband to respect her enough to agree to go on a cruise instead of these other types of vacations. And it's just stories like that that feel so out of touch. For me, there really were only a handful of stories that felt at all relatable. And that's unfortunate, because I was really hoping this would be the most relatable out of the bunch. Unfortunately not. So that is a radical guide for women with ADHD. I wouldn't say it was particularly radical, but alas, it is what it is. I have now moved on to the final book for this video, which is Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. I'm getting close to being halfway through, and so far I'm getting the feeling that this is going to be my favorite. So far, there is a lot more in terms of the science. There are so many helpful asides. There's a lot of practical advice already, and we're not even to the part that's supposed to be about practical advice. I also love how this is formatted. This is by far the most ADHD-friendly format, which you would think all of the books would be written in an ADHD-friendly format if you want people with ADHD to read it, but it's wild how much of a difference it makes. So far, this is a hit for me. I have a feeling this is going to be my highest rated book out of the bunch, unless it really goes downhill from here. But I honestly find that unlikely. So it's looking good so far. Hopefully it will continue to be good so I can finish this video on a high note. That would be great. So I'm gonna go off and finish reading this, and then I will come back for my very final update and let you know my thoughts on this and all the books. And maybe I'll just put them in a ranking for you, and it'll be great and lots of fun. But I'm gonna go now because I'm clearly talking loudly and keeping Yoda awake, even though she would like to sleep. So. checking in for the final time in this video. I finished the last book of this challenge, Taking Charge of Adult ADHD, and I am very happy to report that I can finish off this video with my most favorable review yet. This book was basically everything I was looking for from a book about ADHD, and the one exception I was able to get from another one of the 4 books, so I'm a happy camper. This book is wonderful. Not only is it formatted in the most ADHD-friendly way of any of the books that I read for this challenge, it was so easy to stay engaged because of how many different types of formatting it had. It was clear that so much thought and planning went into making it very ADHD friendly, very easy to stay engaged, to follow along, to have the most important points highlighted or reinforced or even repeated without making it feel repetitive and tedious. Very, very well done. It's also structured in a very logical way that follows from one chapter to the next in a way that makes you just want to keep reading until you're done, which is pretty much what I did. This book can take you from wondering if it's potentially possible, maybe, that you could have ADHD through the process of determining if it's right for you to go get evaluated, helping you with resources to figure out how to actually access a professional who could evaluate you, diagnose you, as the case may be, through to figuring out what to expect in terms of treatment, very detailed information about different types of medication, how they work, different options for types of release of medications, how long they last, potential side effects. There's even a checklist to help you determine whether stimulant or non-stimulant medication would be better for you. It goes into what ADHD feels like, how it presents itself, explains executive functioning in a very detailed yet simple and easy to understand way. Definitely the most thorough explanation of executive functioning that I got in any of these books. It then transitions out of the more educational side of things to the more practical coping strategies. And I was right when I guessed that based on the table of contents, this would have a lot more in terms of practical strategies, coping mechanisms, things to try. This is chock full of ideas and tips and tricks, and goes into more detail than any of the other books that I read for this challenge. So not only does Barkley share his rules for living with ADHD that are a series of rules based on the different types of executive functioning that you can apply in your life to help you to overcome any of the challenges you might face in any of those areas of executive functioning. And each rule gets its own chapter, gets quite a bit of explanation, different examples of how you could apply it. So many tips and tricks. He then transitions into a section that is completely dedicated to different areas of your life and goes even more into detail. So there's a section on school, education, there's a section on work, there's relationships, money. There are so many good jumping off points in this book for figuring out ways, strategies to try that could help you in the specific areas that you're struggling most. I'm just kind of overwhelmed in a really positive way by how much I loved this book. I'm kind of glad it came last because I was starting to lose hope a little bit, and this really sort of fired me up. I got excited about how helpful this book already feels like it is being for me, and how much it's going to be in the future, because there's so much to work from here to just figure out those day-to-day strategies, which really is the number one thing that I was looking for from these books. I really wanted advice for what do I do now? Here are all the areas where you might struggle. Let me help you figure out where you struggle most. Let me give you a bunch of ideas for things you can try that might help you. And I'm going to go in detail and give examples and give you even more options, because you never know what's going to stick. And I really appreciated that. The one thing that this book didn't have was that catharsis, the validation and the moments that really resonated with me. Not to say there was nothing of the sort, because there were definitely moments that were very reassuring and very kind. The tone of this hits a really nice balance between being upfront and realistic and educational, and also being very kind and compassionate and encouraging. Even without those stories, I would say this is my number one recommendation from this video. So let me get into recommendations since I'm already talking about it. I would 100% recommend this for adults with ADHD, or even adults who highly suspect that they might have ADHD but haven't been diagnosed
diagnosed yet, you might be hesitant to buy a book about it if you haven't been diagnosed yet, in case your issue lies somewhere else. But you could always see if your library has a copy or request that they buy a copy, and just read the first couple chapters that are really helpful for determining whether or not it's worth it for you to go get evaluated, and also what to expect when you go get evaluated, because I know for me anyway, I was pretty terrified for my evaluation. I wouldn't recommend this book for parents of children with ADHD, since it is very specifically about helping adults with their own ADHD, although I believe there's a version of this book written for parents of children with ADHD, so I would definitely recommend checking out that one. Even though I haven't read it, I feel pretty confident recommending it, considering how great this book was. I would say that medical professionals who are not experts in ADHD could learn a lot from reading this book, and would highly recommend that they keep it as a resource. That's another great thing about this, is that I think the way it's structured makes it very well suited to going back in and referencing things. Once you've read through the entire thing, being able to go in and just focus on one area or another, remind yourself of what kind of delivery system this particular ADHD medication has, what that one specific symptom from the DSM-5 was, or whatever. Again, not necessarily for teachers, but I would assume that the version aimed at parents of children with ADHD would potentially be very beneficial for teachers as well. So that would probably be my recommendation there. It's probably not a shock, but I'm going to be giving this one 5 stars. It's not a perfect book, but it was so close to perfect in so many ways that I just have to give it to it. I'm very, very impressed. I can understand why Russell Barkley is seen as sort of the pinnacle of ADHD experts and is so well respected, because he knows his stuff and he clearly understands ADHD on a very deep level. So yay for this book. I'm so happy to finish on a positive note like this. So now let's rank the books. I feel like it's going to be pretty obvious what the ranking is, but let's do it anyway. So from least favorite to most favorite, let's see. A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD is going to be in last place for me. This just had the least to give in terms of benefits or information or strategies to take forward. It really wasn't for me. I think it is suited for the least number of people and probably the least successful at achieving what it set out to achieve out of the 4 books. Next, in third place, Driven to Distraction. There's definitely more information here, more strategies. It can be helpful for more types of people, especially medical professionals and teachers. Not the most ADHD-friendly book to read, but if you are a teacher or a medical professional who doesn't have ADHD yourself and you just want to learn about it, that probably won't be an issue for you. So this one is in third place. Then for second place, I'm giving it to Scattered Minds. Again, potentially controversial, but this book, regardless of any of the sections on how ADHD comes to be developed, which may or may not be accurate. Honestly, for me personally, it doesn't matter. The stories that were included in this book resonated with me so deeply and really helped me so much with accepting my diagnosis early on and processing it and feeling less alone and feeling more compassion for myself. And that's really invaluable, I think. Like I said, when I first reviewed this, I think that this could be really helpful for parents because, again, regardless of whether his theory about attachment and attunement in early childhood affecting ADHD is correct or not, a lot of the tips he gives for parenting a child with ADHD are just going to be helpful for parents of kids with ADHD. And of course, in first place, my favorite book from this challenge, Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. This one is pretty much everything I was looking for out of a book for adults with ADHD. It's fantastic, very easy to read, so helpful, packed full of ideas for things to try. Very well deserving of the top spot. So I'll pop on the screen a little graphic here to, again, summarize who I would recommend each of these books for, just in case you want to screenshot it to refer to later. I really hope that this video helped you to figure out which of these books, if any, are best suited to what you need out of a book on ADHD. I would be really interested to hear where your head is at after watching this video. I definitely learned a lot reading all 4 of these, and there are things I learned and will take takeaway from each of the four. No matter how I felt about them overall, there are little nuggets of wisdom that I can take from each and every one of them. So I have a lot of things to implement now because I've done a lot of reading, but now it's time to take action. And that's always the hardest part, but at least now I have some resources. I have lots of places to start, so that is always good. Thank you again to Brooklinen for sponsoring this video. Don't forget that Brooklinen has their birthday sale on now, and you can get 25% off on their website. So check out the link in the description box. Thanks again to Brooklinen for sending me my new very cozy luxe sheets. If you've read a book about ADHD that you loved and found super helpful that I didn't read in this video, let me know in the comments below in case I decide to read even more books on ADHD, as if I haven't read enough for at least a year at this point. Thank you again for joining me for this entire marathon of a video. It has been a long time in the making, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support. I appreciate you all so, so much, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.